It's part 2 of Company of Heroes Abridged. In the first part we saw a bit of the Battle of Stalingrad, getting plenty of conscripts killed. Then we flashed back to before that, where we're doing a fighting retreat against the Germans, and setting everything on fire on the way of course for good measure. And we're now starting a mission where we need to hold the Germans in some snowy place called Mitensk. At the start of the mission, we're just defending 3 capture points on the edge of the map against some spammed infantry assaults. I noticed we have a heavy machine gun supporting us here, but it is actually shooting at my troops. I'm guessing the bullets don't inflict friendly fire damage. Well, there's some karma. The next time we look at the guy, he's dead. So there we go. Now we can get a new gunner. Maybe they'll fire at the enemy. We can also use the conscript squad to add a big crew to the machine gun, meaning it's going to be harder for the machine gun to get silenced. However, now that those conscripts are in the machine gun crew, I can't order them to move so that they're in cover with respect to the way the enemy are attacking, without moving the entire machine gun, and it has to be packed up and unpacked when you do that, so that's inconvenient. But for now, the machine gun might be firing at the enemy. That's got to be a good thing. In the center, the Germans are doing a rush B strategy to try and take our capture point. Luckily, with us still standing on it, they can't do that, and it doesn't go very well for them. Here come some guys with a flamethrower. Tried to shoot them down, but people are too bulletproof. Luckily, they're fireproof as well. We do get toasted a bit, but it doesn't appear to do too much damage, and we get away with it. And this is how it carries on for a while. We're just being spammed with infantry. Although we are starting to lose ground, these flamethrowers are a bit inconvenient because I don't have the micro to take them down. I also haven't deployed the maximum number of troops we're allowed here, which isn't going to help. And of course, tanks showing up doesn't help either, because we don't actually have anything that can fight the tanks right now. It's one of these things where the game is quite interested in putting you in a defensive situation and then towards the end of that situation throwing something at you that it hasn't allowed you to have units to counter, so that you can feel under pressure and feel relieved when it then tells you to leave, which is what happens just afterwards. We can abandon those 3 positions and defend 3 other positions slightly further back instead. So that's all very nice. So we're going to continue pretty much the same thing. We do have to remember to tell our units to retreat, which is of course always a problem. Luckily they all get out of there just in time, as the enemy appear to be bombarding everything with artillery, and their own tanks are in the bombardment zone, so that will probably help, although the fog of war appears before we see how much friendly fire damage occurred. For this next defensive wave, we've got some time to prepare again, so we'll put down some mines and some barbed wire. We also have some Guards Regiment troops, some non-trash infantry, which is always special. I'm going to throw those guys into buildings near the 3 capture points to just hold on for as long as possible. Soon the time limit's up and stuff will start to attack us. We've got a few machine guns and anti-tank guns ready, but the buildings with infantry in them are kind of going to do a lot of the work, because buildings give you a lot of cover and you don't have to micro them very much. They're going to shoot in all directions. The enemy are just kind of running right up to the buildings and probably taking some very poor trades in these firefights. What I'd like to see is a realism mod where they just die running up to a building in the open and getting shot. Maybe one day. Here we've got a bit of pressure at the central point, because some guys have just crawled around the arc of fire of my machine guns, and these things do take quite a lot of micro to keep them fighting effectively, because they'll only shoot forwards, they won't turn on their own initiative. You have to order them to do it, which when combined with things like the zoomed in camera causes issues, because you just can't really see whether all of your narrow arced weapons are being put to good use at once. You have to keep looking between them, and I'm not doing it fast enough of course. Some control groups might be good here. Overall though, we're still holding our position vaguely against these first waves of infantry, but it does gradually get worse and worse, especially down there in the bottom left, where the pressure is on and we only have a few troops actually defending that position. This tank is in a slightly inconvenient position because my guns firing at it are shooting the ground in front of it half the time. I think that's what they call the hull down position in tank talk, a very strong position to put a tank in. We've also got all these units sitting at the back that are half dead after retreating that I need to micro to bring their soldiers back into the squad and then bring them back to the front line. Overall, that's pretty much this entire game. It just puts you in situations where you have to micro a lot, and the main pressure is that I can't do it. I'm presuming it would be possible to do it if I could learn the hotkeys, but because you have to have your left hand on the directional keys to move the camera in the way that I like, I haven't really been using the hotkeys. things get really close to failing here at the bottom left because we end up with one guy literally defending this area. We pop an Ura there on him to buff his stats, but he does die. So now we're going to turn my anti-tank guns to vaguely fire down the flank into this position to help out. That won't do too much, but the arrival of a fresh wave of conscripts stops that enemy squad from taking the capture point, and thus the objective is not failed or anything like that, and we carry on. Now we'll just spam more stuff there to reinforce. I eventually got to a point when I realised that southwestern point isn't too difficult to defend if you just put troops inside that church, because that church building is kind of on the capture point. So even if you have nothing else defending it, the fact that the building is garrisoned will stop it from being decapped, and that's fine. Plus, stuff in buildings tends not to die for a very long time. So this was the ultimate solution. We ended up barely defending this area at all. The anti-tank guns are doing well though. The enemy haven't noticed them, they're just sitting there in the open and taking out enemy tanks. They do require a bit of micro again because of their limited arc of fire, and they won't turn on their own. But the enemy tanks are sufficiently distracted, killing my conscripts and machine gun crews and the like, that it all works out in the end. Now we're going to turn our attention to the top part of the map. When a tank does a wild charge into our lines, we've got an anti-tank gun pointing at it, but it's not enough to stop it, and they just drive around it ultimately. So I suppose the anti-tank gun was not anti-tank enough if the tanks can just literally drive to the other side of it, and that's fine. But this enemy tank does make a crucial mistake now. It decides to stop and try to engage my engineers there. We can just run away with the engineers, and that distraction allows the anti-tank gun to turn around, shoot point blank into the tank, quite literally in that the barrel was inside the tank when they fired the weapon, and that appears to take it out, so that's all good stuff. Things continue to get worse from here. You can see the enemy actually got a couple of tanks into my HQ, which disrupts my reinforcements. Luckily, the game is merciful. As things were getting very bad, the objective changes to retaking the ridge where we were at the start, and it provides a few tanks on our side to help out with this. Plus, the enemy units, I believe, are scripted to run away, so a lot of the stuff that was in our base killing our dudes just leaves. That's handy. Now it's time for a bit of tank combat. This proved to be actually a little bit worse than I thought. I figured, well, I'll just charge all of my tanks up the ridge and outflank the enemy's positions, because they had a bunch of guns just facing us, and machine guns too. I thought the tanks will go in, be shooting on the flanks, and that will probably take them out. I'm not seeing very much anti-tank stuff there. But it went quite poorly for two reasons. They had a few of their own tanks up here that were taking us out. Plus, I think their heavy machine guns do a bit of damage to tanks. You're not immune to heavy bullet fire with these tanks, or at least that's how it seemed to be. Plus, while I was microing the tanks, I wasn't microing everything else, so we didn't really support this attack with infantry, a classic real-life tank tactics mistake. Well, things go well enough in the end. Even though 2 of my 3 tank attacks ultimately failed, they did weaken the enemy, I presume, somewhat. And on the left, where I attacked with 2 tanks in the same place, it went better. So we were able to take 1 of the 3 ridge points okay. And then I started bringing up infantry and stuff to support, and just move as a whole across the front line to take the other 2, which really is probably what you're supposed to do from the beginning. Once everything's fighting together, we're fine, because we can keep our front armor facing the enemy's tanks, and everything else can barely damage us. We essentially win the mission there, so I'm just going to skip to the start of the next mission. We're still somewhere in this area, near Moscow, trying to defend against the German advance, but now it's a bit later in the winter, and it's really cold, and this adds a new mechanic. Once it gets really cold, people just die. So here we have the famous Russian winter taking effect. Infantry will now die if they're in deep snow out in the open. And they die quite quickly, as you can see. From the start of the mission to the first fireplace you have to reach to prevent death, we lose one of our 2 squads entirely. I feel like they were intending that just to show you how quickly you die in the snow and make you scared of it, so that's handy. We're left with 6 guys, probably enough to complete our objective, which is to retake the map from the Germans. The thing was, I didn't really want to at this stage. I thought, well, if we step away from this fire, we're going to die. Why don't we just stay here for a bit? Maybe it will stop snowing or something. Unfortunately, that's not going to be how it works. What we can do though is go and link up with a couple of snipers nearby, and snipers have special training so that they are immune to cold damage, just like in real life, ? So that's going to make things a bit easier for us here on this special map. We win the battle for a fireplace and then move on for a bit of slow-placed sniper exploitation stuff, because the snipers outrange most things, as you might imagine. So the many buildings in the area garrisoned with enemy troops are going to be easy pickings, especially because the AI doesn't massively notice you doing this, which is quite handy. Right here we clear out their little bunker position, and they immediately reinforce it from a nearby building. With a bit of heat vision we can somehow see the guys inside that building. I sniped again at the bunker. This time though they noticed I was doing it and fired back, but all I need to do is sneak slightly back out of their line of sight and we'll be fine. This guy is going to run forward, that doesn't go very well for him. And now we can't see the building, but we still actually can shoot it, because the snipers have longer range than they can see, and that's where that flare you can see in the middle of the screen comes in. They can shoot out flares to reveal parts of the map. So if you reveal part of the map just on the edge of their line of sight, they can shoot into it, and this really confuses the enemy because they totally can't see you. So we take out a couple of squads of infantry with impunity using the snipers, and now we can safely move on. So doing that, we gradually move across the map and capture this lower base area. We get a bunch of extra units for doing this, but they're not too useful to us right now because we're still stuck near the fires, so we can hang out in this area, but it's going to have to be the snipers leading the advance, although we do also capture a half-track which is immune to cold damage. Here you can see me trying to do something with the infantry. There is a chance, because the roads don't give you the cold damage, it's just the snow on either side. So it's kind of RNG here, whether part of your unit decides to stand in the snow or not. I'm pretty sure if one guy's in the snow, the whole unit is, as far as the game's concerned. So I'm trying to set up units here in positions that won't cause them to die. Some of them are still alive, some of them are dying, and after a lot of micro I'm forced to give up with this MG team, but you can see the nearby infantry have also gone and sat in the snow, and now they're going to die. Ultimately, this plan doesn't work very well. What I did is just have the snipers move forward and then come back. This aggroed a bunch of enemy units at a nearby enemy base to come over to where I was, which is perfect. We don't even have to fight them here. I've got the half-track just sitting there shooting machine gun. That's going to be enough to fight them, even normally. But with the enemy dying of cold damage, they're actually just going to disappear without us doing too much. So there we go, we are using that Russian winter against them, even though it's affecting me quite a bit as well. I suppose that's pretty realistic. The whole point is that it affected both sides negatively, but the German side a bit more negatively perhaps, and that's what we saw right here, so all very good. After that I decided to advance up with just the snipers, leaving everything behind, to secure this next base. We've got this little courtyard with 3 fires and a building, a nice place to have all of our stuff set up next, so we clear it out with the snipers, and then we can use the half-track to get over here without dying, because the units don't take cold damage when they're in the back of the half-track. Plus, by moving up some engineers in the first leg, we can then capture another half-track and do it extra fast. So that's handy. Our base moves up, and now we're going to be based right next to our objective. There's an actual base with like buildings and fences and stuff that we need to capture. While I was moving stuff over, I also cleared out a few enemies off to the left. This machine gunner appeared to be aware for a second that something was going wrong, and he fired his weapon. No one else seemed to mind. Overall, it seems these snipers are a bit exploity, but I think that's all perfectly intentional there. Just a powerful single unit that dies very easily or something, and this is a map specifically built to use them exploitatively. Maybe normally the AI would actually try to return fire and stuff. Looks like somebody fired at my snipers there, a machine gunner who immediately died or disappeared or something. It was at this stage in the mission that I realised I was supposed to be doing this destroy the German tanks objective, and I have been walking past a lot of destroyed German tanks. I thought they were just props until it finally sort of clicked that that's what that side objective was talking about. I could go back with the engineers and blow them all up. I decided to just not do that to save time, and we'll see what the consequence of not doing the side objective is. I thought I'd break into the enemy base by driving through the fence with a half-track. I figured that was going to be awfully clever. Turns out you can't do that. You might be able to do it with tanks or something. As it happens, the base was completely deserted, so we actually get in for free, and now we have to move on to the final objective, just taking another smaller base in the corner of the map. On the way there was a tank sitting on the road, and I thought this one looks different, maybe we can capture it. But no, they were just chilling there, quite literally. They drive off once we get close to them. And they'll be back to inconveniences later. I think that's the point of the game, showing us that. For this final base then, at first I thought, well, we'll just do this again, use the flare to extend our sniping range, and snipe out everything before we advance. But this time, they've got something to stop us from doing that. There are a couple of mortars back there, and after seeing them I just got out of there because I figured this is what's going to happen. The mortars will have the same range as the sniper rifles, and once you reveal yourself by firing, you will explode if you don't immediately move. So with enough micro, you could still do the sniping strategy here. But I decided to activate big brain time and do something else. First, I put all of our infantry on the half-tracks and moved them across the river elsewhere, so now we're on the right flank of the enemy base, while the snipers come down from the left. They can just walk across the river because it's frozen for the most part. So, I thought we could snipe them from a different angle where the mortars weren't facing us and would be able to take them out quickly. But when I went into that building, they all saw me, so I thought, well, I'll get out of here again and try to disappear. Interestingly, the enemy kept attacking the building after I left, so they weren't that confident about where I was. In fact, now they've got infantry right outside the building, and they're shelling the building with the mortars, and some of those shots actually kill their own infantry. Overall, not that good. And the real upside is that while they're distracted shooting at the building, we take out one of the mortar crews with the snipers. Then though, the enemy occupy the building and start firing at the snipers, so I run off with more shells still falling down, killing their own side. This was a nice confusing attack by the looks of things. I then decided to just go for it with the half-tracks. I thought, let's just drive into the middle of their base and see what happens. What we can do is use the machine guns on the half-tracks to just quickly take out the mortar team. That's going to be a bit faster than any sort of sniper micro strategy. There's no specific anti-vehicle stuff here, but those heavy machine guns are going to damage our light vehicles, so we don't want to hang around. Now we're going to drive back towards where the snipers are hanging out, because if we can get the fight away from the machine guns and make the infantry go over there, then the half-tracks will effectively act like tanks in the RPG sense, in that they'll distract the enemy and absorb damage, while the snipers take out all of these infantry. And that is what happens precisely. So we clear out the base, apart from the entrenched machine gun positions, then we can do the flare sniping technique to finish them off without them firing back, thus securing this position. That's not quite the end of the mission though, because now you have to survive a wave of enemy counterattacks. This actually went quite well for the enemy. They immediately ran right into the middle of my base. We weren't really prepared for this. I'm still setting up my troops as the attack's coming in. We've got this machine gun facing the wrong direction. That's not going to really help. I thought they might be coming from over there, but they're not. My other machine gun is in this building. I wanted it to fire up and left as the enemy were approaching across the river, but you can't turn the machine gun in a building, it seems. The game has decided to face it up and right. That's okay actually, because the enemy keep running to where the machine gun is facing for whatever reason, so we're still using it, but it just wasn't quite ideal. Then we get some information that that tank is coming back, and it says we can destroy it using the mortars. We've captured the enemy's 2 mortars, and we can use mortar barrage to effectively do an attack ground order on the ice the tank is sitting on. The big problem is that my mortar teams are dying extremely rapidly. This is effectively what the enemy are doing. They're just running past everything and are throwing grenades at where the mortars are, and we lose all of the mortar team. However, they'd already got some shots off just before they died, and they then land, taking out the ice, which also causes all of the infantry to run away. So we just barely got away with that, completing the mission and completing the second order flashback. So the flashback within the flashback is over. This is the top level of the flashback. We're at Stalingrad from the first mission, so after we've taken back a part of it. There's a lot of shouting about how we will be killed if we try to retreat. Everyone's having a good joke about that, but seriously guys, they are going to kill us, so let's go forwards, I guess, is the ultimate conclusion, which is the conclusion they wanted us to come to. I guess it all worked out in the end. So we now just have another Stalingrad battle. We need to take back another part of it. We'll just look at the very beginning of this one. In this mission it introduces this new Order 227 mechanic, where it says you'll die if you retreat. It wasn't actually quite as bad as I thought. What I thought they were going to do with this was force you to always move away from your HQ, and if you moved back, your own troops would start attacking you or something. But when they say retreat, they mean a specific thing, where if you press the T key on the keyboard, your troops will sprint back to their base building, and that's when they'll get killed. Plus, it kind of wears off the Order 227 thing, so right now I can retreat, for example. Retreating wouldn't be a bad idea because we are getting annihilated by some flamethrower guys. They kill a squad. I've got corner camping in this little base area, and then they start killing this squad. I threw a petrol bomb at them because you can fight fire with fire. It doesn't make them explode or something, which I thought might happen, but it takes them out and we don't lose quite so many troops. You can see we've now gone back to 227 mode. Basically, whenever you order a new unit to run up to the front line, there's a short period where you can't retreat. I don't really use that retreat very much because my micro is too bad to use it, so we're kind of okay, we're kind of safe from this mechanic for now. So we'll just semi-arbitrarily end things here. Just wanted to show the start of this mission and this little bit of micro. Check this out. I spotted that the enemy were setting up a rifle grenade attack, predicted who it was going to hit, and then moved them out of the way. That's the kind of micro we need. You just have to be paying attention, and you can get away with stuff like that. And if only we could zoom out the camera, we could pay attention to more of the map at once. Or maybe I could just get good, that might solve it as well. I'm going to be getting gooder as we go on, since I'm getting more and more experience and getting used to the game in general. So we'll rejoin the rest of this Stalingrad mission and whatever other shenanigans the game has to throw at us next time. I'm guessing that as we get towards the end of the game we might need to slow the pace down or something, but I hope to get through a couple of missions per episode and keep this series somewhat short. But don't hold me to that.